Welcome, weary YouTube traveler. You've stumbled into my Tales Crypt. Now that you're trapped here, welcome here. Please, get comfortable. Anywhere is fine. Yes, there, next to that Raggedy Ann doll, that's fine. In fact, it's perfect. I hope you brought a snack, a drink, and your work in progress because now that I have you as a captive audience, I'd like to tell you a tale. Did you know that dolls have been a part of human play for thousands of years? In fact, in 2004, a 4,000-year-old stone doll was unearthed in an archaeological dig on the Mediterranean island of Pantelleria. In fact, the British Museum has several examples of ancient Egyptian rag dolls made of papyrus stuffed linen. Over millennia, toy dolls have crossed continents and social strata. Most were made from sticks and rags, or porcelain and vinyl, and they have been found in the hands of children across the globe. And by virtue of the fact that dolls are people in miniature, unanimated by their own emotions, it's easy for society to project whatever it wants onto them. However, just as much as they can be made out of anything, they can also be made into anything. So dolls, without really meaning to, actually mean a lot. But one of the more relatively recent ways we relate to dolls is as objects of, and this is a totally scientific term, creepiness. A fear of dolls does have a proper name, pediophobia, and that's kind of classified under the broader fear of humanoid figures. That is called automatonophobia and related to puppophobia, a fear of puppets. Research into why we think things are creepy and what potential use that might have is somewhat limited, but it does exist. In 2013, Frank McAndrew, a psychologist at Knox College in Illinois, and graduate student Sarah Konicki put out a small paper on their work hypothesizing about what creepiness really means. The paper was based on the results of a survey of more than 1,300 people and investigated what creeped them out. By the way, collecting dolls was named one of the creepiest hobbies in that survey. According to McAndrew, creepiness comes down to uncertainty. He says you're getting mixed messages. If something is clearly frightening, you scream and you run away. But if something is disgusting, you know how to act. But if something is creepy, it might be dangerous, but you're not sure that it is, and there's kind of an ambivalence to it. It's much like if someone is acting outside of acceptable social norms, like standing too close or staring, we become suspicious of their intention. But in the absence of any real evidence of a threat, we kind of go into a waiting pattern or mode, and in the meantime, we just consider it creepy. It really serves to focus our attention and help us process any relevant information to decide whether something is to be feared or not. I really think creepiness is where we respond to situations where we don't have enough information to respond, but we do have enough information to put us on guard. It just so happens that dolls inhabit this area of uncertainty, largely because they look human, but we know they're not. Our brains, they're designed to read faces for important information about intention, emotion, potential threat, and we're so primed to see faces and respond to them that we end up seeing them everywhere. I know we've all heard and seen those stories about people seeing, maybe Jesus or Mother Mary in a piece of toast or melted cheese on a pizza or on a grilled cheese. We're programmed to find a facial structure in really random patterns. This catch-all phenomena is called pareidolia. Anyway, however much we know that a doll is likely not a threat, seeing a face that looks human but isn't, it unsettles our most basic human instincts. But before the 18th or 19th centuries, dolls weren't really real enough to be threatening. Only when they began to look too human did dolls start to become creepy. Perhaps it comes down to what we, can make dolls into. It's exactly the kind of thing that's easy to exploit in media. Some doll makers blame Hollywood films for the creepy doll stigma, and there's no doubt that movie makers have used dolls to great effect. In the 20th century, creepy dolls became more actively homicidal as motion picture technology transformed the safely inanimate into the dangerously animate. One of the earlier examples of this Hollywood effect was a movie in 1936 called The Devil Doll, featuring Lionel Barrymore as a man wrongfully convicted of murder who turns two living humans into doll-sized assassins to wreak his revenge on the men who framed him. And then there was The Twilight Zone's murderous Talkie Tina, inspired by one of the most popular influential dolls at the time, the Chatty Cathy. Talkie Tina said, quote, "My name is Talkie Tina, and you'd better be nice to me." There was also that evil clown doll from Poltergeist. And we can't forget about Chucky, the My Buddy clone possessed by the soul of a serial killer in the Child's Play series. The 1980s and 90s saw dozens of B-movie variations on the homicidal doll theme. Dolly Dearest, demonic toys, blood dolls. And in 2005, the evil denizens of the doll graveyard came back for the teenaged souls and eyeballs, apparently. And in 2007, homicidal ventriloquist dummies were going around ripping people's tongues out in dead silence. And in more recent movie history, devil worshippers inadvertently turned a smiling vintage doll into a grinning demon in Annabelle, a film inspired by the Conjuring franchise. Director John Leonetti told Huffington Post that dolls made exceptional vehicles for horror films. Quote, "If you think about them, most dolls are emulating a human figure. But they're missing one big thing, which is emotion. So they're shells. It's natural, psychological, and justifiable as a vehicle for demons to take it over. If you look at it, a doll, in its eyes, it just stares. That's creepy. They're hollow inside, and that space needs to be filled." End quote. With what, though? Evil? Demonic dolls, however, become far creepier and more titillating when it's accompanied by the claim that it's, quote, "based on a true story," end quote. Paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren have claimed that Annabelle, the Raggedy Ann doll, whose original owners frequently found her in places they hadn't left her, and Robert, a lifelong companion of an eccentric Key West artist who was reported to be haunted as well. These stories of haunted dolls are kind of like stories of real-life clowns who murdered. They feed a narrative that make things that normally aren't scary very, very creepy. And thus, we turn our attention to one of the two main subjects of today's tale, Annabelle. Annabelle is an allegedly haunted Raggedy Ann doll housed in the now closed occult museum of the paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Annabelle was moved there after supposed hauntings in 1970. A character based on the doll is one of the antagonists that appears in the Conjuring universe. But let's get the whole picture. Let's first talk about the origins of the Raggedy Ann doll. The origin story itself is a bit of an eyebrow raiser and kind of shrouded in some mystery. Raggedy Ann herself is a character created by American writer Johnny Gruelle, 1880 to 1938, that appeared in a series of books that he wrote and illustrated for young children. Raggedy Ann is a rag doll with red yarn for hair and a triangle nose. The character was created in 1915 as a doll and was introduced to the public in a book in 1918 called Raggedy Ann Stories. And when a doll was marketed with the book, the concept had great success. The exact details and origins of the Raggedy Ann doll and related stories, which were created by Mr. Gruelle, are not specifically known, although numerous myths and legends about the doll's origins have been widely repeated. According to the most often repeated myth, Gruel's daughter, Marcella, brought from her grandmother's attic a faceless cloth doll on which the artist drew a face, and that Gruel suggested Marcella's grandmother sew shoe buttons for the missing eyes. The date of this supposed occurrence is given as early as 1900, but as late as 1914, with the locale variously given as suburban Indianapolis or downtown Cleveland. Sometimes it's in rural Connecticut. And to add to the intrigue of the Raggedy Ann doll in general, it's claimed that Gruel created Raggedy Ann as a tribute to his daughter, anticipating her death at age 13 from an infected vaccination. As the artist received final approval from the U.S. Patent Office in September of 1915, the same month as Marcella's death. Side note, the anti-vaccination movement adopted Raggedy Ann as a symbol, though Marcella died from an infected vaccination, not from the side effects of the vaccination itself. Also, fun fact, the Raggedy Ann name was allegedly created by combining words from two James Whitcomb Riley poems, The Raggedy Man and The Orphan Annie. Now back to our Raggedy Ann doll story about Annabelle. In short, according to the Warrens, a student nurse was given the doll in 1970. They said that the doll behaved strangely and that a psychic medium told the student that the doll was inhabited by the spirit of a deceased girl named Annabelle Higgins. The student and her roommate tried to accept and nurture the spirit-possessed doll, but the doll reportedly exhibited malicious and frightening behavior over time. It was at this point that the Warrens say they were first contacted, and they moved the doll to their museum after pronouncing it demonically possessed. And the doll remained in a glass box at the Warrens Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut, until the museum's closure over zoning violations. Who are the Warrens, you ask? The Warrens have investigated more than 10,000 cases of paranormal activity. Ed Warren was a World War II veteran and a former police officer who became a self-professed demonologist after studying the subject on his own. His wife, Lorraine, claimed to be clairvoyant and a medium who was capable of communicating with the demons that Ed discovered. In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, the oldest ghost hunting group in New England. They quickly gained notoriety as respected paranormal investigators after their initial investigation of the Amityville house hauntings. The Warrens have done jobs throughout the United States and abroad, as far as Japan, England, Scotland, France, Australia, and the list goes on. The couple only charged travel expenses and nothing for the actual investigation, but they did build an empire on books and movies and lectures about their cases. Some of their famous cases besides Amityville and Annabelle include the Demon Murder, Werewolf, the Smurl Family, the Perrons, Stepney Cemetery, Borley Church, that's the nun, by the way, Union Cemetery, and The Haunting in Connecticut. Now, a lot of us have seen or heard about the Annabelle movies. Those movies do not resemble the real-life story because in the movie, the doll is owned by a young couple and is given to a woman for her doll collection. And as the woman nears her pregnancy due date, a pair of satanic cultists break in and stab the pregnant woman in the belly and end up dead in their home. One of the cultists is named Annabelle Higgins, and some of her blood lands on the doll. Then that's when the doll starts doing over-the-top scary things. But the real story goes like this. This is the true story of Annabelle according to the Warrens. As the story goes, the Annabelle doll had been a gift to a young nurse named Donna from her mother for her 28th birthday. Donna, apparently thrilled with the gift, brought it back to her apartment that she shared with another young nurse named Angie. At first, the doll was an adorable accessory, sitting on a sofa in the living room and greeting visitors with her colorful visage. But before long, the two women began to notice that Annabelle seemed to move about the room of her own accord. Donna would sit her in the living room sofa before leaving for work, only to come home in the afternoon and find her in a bedroom with the door shut. Donna and Angie then started finding notes left throughout the apartment, reading, "Help me." According to the women, these notes were written on a special kind of parchment paper, which they'd never even kept in their home. Furthermore, Angie's boyfriend, who we only know as Lou, was in the apartment one afternoon while Donna was out and heard rustling in her room as if someone had broken in. Upon inspection, he found no sign of forced entry, but did find the Annabelle doll lying face down on the ground. Some other versions of the story say he was attacked upon waking up from a nap. Not really sure which one's accurate. Suddenly, he felt a searing pain on his chest and he looked down to find bloody claw marks running across his chest. 2 days later, those marks and claw scratches had vanished without a trace. This was a quite traumatic experience for Lou, and following this experience, the women invited a medium over to help solve their seemingly paranormal problem. The medium held a seance and told the women that the doll had been inhabited by the spirit of a deceased 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins, whose body had been found years earlier on the site where the apartment building had been built. Other accounts have her as being killed in a car accident outside the apartment building, so again, a little bit of inconsistency here. After the girls welcomed the doll into their home, things escalated and kind of took a turn for the dark side. The doll continued teleporting to different places in the house. Sometimes they would report coming home and seeing this completely rag doll standing in the hallway on its feet, waiting for them when they opened the door and came home from work. There was no way to make a rag doll stand upright on its feet. They couldn't replicate it. They couldn't figure out how it was done, and it happened quite frequently. There were reports that men who would stay in the house would have nightmares of the doll crawling up from the foot of the bed over their bodies, sitting on their chest and strangling them. And in some cases, they would wake up out of breath and with bruises and markings on their necks. Eventually, in an attempt to rid their home of the Annabelle doll's spirit because she had become so frightful to everyone in the house, Donna and Angie called on an Episcopalian priest known as Father Hegan. Hegan contacted his superior, Father Cook, who alerted Ed and Lorraine Warren. As far as Ed and Lorraine Warren were concerned, the two young ladies' troubles truly started when they began believing that the doll deserved their sympathy. The Warrens believed that there was actually a demonic force in search of a human host within Annabelle, not a benevolent soul of a child. Immediately, the Warrens noted that they believed there were signs of demonic possession, including teleportation, meaning the doll was moving around on its own, materialization, like the parchment paper notes when no such paper was in the house at all, and the mark of the beast, the claw marks on Lou's chest. The Warrens subsequently ordered an exorcism of the apartment to be performed by Father Cook. Then they took Annabelle out of the apartment to her final resting place in their occult museum in hopes that her demonic reign would finally end. Following Annabelle's removal from Donna and Angie's apartment, the Warrens documented several other paranormal experiences involving the doll, the first just minutes after they took possession of her. After the exorcism of the nurse's apartment, the Warrens buckled Annabelle into the back seat of their car and vowed not to take the highway in case she became some kind of accident-causing power over them and their vehicle. However, even taking the safer back roads proved too risky for the couple. On their way home, Lorraine claimed that the brakes either stalled or failed several times, resulting in near disastrous crashes. Lorraine also claimed that as soon as Ed pulled holy water from his bag and doused the doll with it, the problems with the brakes just disappeared and resolved on their own. Upon arriving home, Ed and Lorraine placed the doll in Ed's study. There, they reported that the doll levitated and moved about the house freely. Even when placed in a locked office in an outer building, the Warrens claimed that she could turn up later inside the house in various different spots. It was then that the Warrens finally decided to lock Annabelle up for good. The Warrens had a specially made glass and wood case constructed, upon which they inscribed the Lord's Prayer and St. Michael's Prayer. For the rest of his life, Ed Warren would periodically say a binding prayer over the case, ensuring that the sinister spirit and the doll remained good and trapped. And since being locked up, Annabelle the doll hasn't moved again, though it is alleged that her spirit finds other ways to reach out to the earthly plane. A few things have occurred since Annabelle's confinement. Once, a priest who was visiting the Warrens Museum picked up Annabelle and discounted her demonic abilities. Ed warned the priest about mocking Annabelle's demonic power, but the young priest just laughed him off. On his way home, the priest was involved in a near-fatal crash that totaled his new car. He claimed that he saw Annabelle in his rearview mirror just before the accident occurred. Years later, another visitor rapped on the glass of Annabelle's doll case and laughed at how silly people were to believe in her. And on his way home, he reportedly lost control of his motorcycle and crashed head-on into a tree. He was killed instantly, and his passenger girlfriend just barely survived. She spent a year in the hospital in a coma before finally recovering and being released. Upon release, she went back to the Warrens and claimed that at the time of the accident, the couple had been laughing about the Annabelle doll while driving down the road on their motorcycle, and that's when the crash occurred. Over the years, the Warrens continued to recount these tales as proof of Annabelle the doll's horrific powers. None of these stories could ever be corroborated. The names of the young priest and the motorcyclist were never divulged by the Warrens, and neither Donna nor Angie, the two nurses who were Annabelle's first victims, ever came forward with their story publicly. Neither Father Cook nor Father Hegan ever appeared to have mentioned their exorcisms or her ever again. And it would appear that all we have is the Warrens' word that any of this ever even took place. So, let's talk about how the Annabelle doll's real-life stories became a movie franchise. Whether or not any of these hauntings actually took place, the tales left behind were all that the directors and producers needed to pull together a long-lasting, lucrative horror universe. Beginning in 2014, the story of Annabelle was written, and it was written as a child-size haunted porcelain doll with lifelike features and a penchant for violence, using the real-life Annabelle doll as inspiration. Of course, there are several differences between the Warrens' Raggedy Ann doll and its cinematic counterpart, a porcelain doll. The most obvious difference is the doll itself. While Annabelle is clearly a child's toy with its exaggerated features and plush body parts, the movie version of Annabelle is inspired by vintage handmade dolls made of porcelain with real braided hair and glistening glass eyes. Along with her physical features, Annabelle's antics are also amped up for shock value in the movies. Rather than terrorizing a pair of roommates and one boyfriend, movie Annabelle moves from home to home, attacking families and possessing members of satanic cults, killing children, posing as nuns, and causing chaos in the Warrens' own home. And despite the fact that the real Annabelle only has one alleged murder under her belt, the producers and directors invented enough destruction for 3 successful movies, and it's still going. But anyway, today, the real Annabelle sits in a glass case bearing a hand-carved inscription of the Lord's Prayer, and a pleasant smile rests upon her happy little face under a mop of red yarn hair. But beneath the case is a sign that reads, quote, "Warning, positively do not open," end quote. An investigation by the New England Skeptical Society proved that the artifacts in the Warrens Occult Museum were mostly fraudulent items, citing doctored photos and exaggerated storytelling. The real-life fears surrounding the original Annabelle doll only flared up even more after, in August 2020, reports surfaced that she had escaped the Warrens Occult Museum because it had closed down, at least temporarily, due to a zoning issue in 2019. Rumors quickly spread all over social media about Annabelle and how she was free and missing, but those reports were quickly outed as inaccurate. Here's some Hollywood side notes. The Warren story of the doll served as inspiration for the Annabelle doll character depicted in the Conjuring universe, a film series that includes the following movies: Annabelle, 2014, Annabelle Creation, 2017, and Annabelle Comes Home, 2019. The directors and producers did not use the likeness of the Raggedy Ann doll, partially due to potential trademark issues, but also to make the doll's appearance more unsettling for a horror film. Its appearance has been described as, quote, terrifying porcelain doll that is disfigured and immediately menacing, end quote. The character makes its first appearance in James Wan's The Conjuring in 2013, and additionally makes brief appearances in his sequel, The Conjuring 2, 2016, and Michael Chavez's The Curse of La Llorona in 2021, and in The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It in 2020. Now get this. She also appears in DC Extended Universe films Aquaman 2018 and Shazam 2019, respectively, directed by Wan, and Annabelle Creation director David F. Sandberg. The doll also appeared in Shazam: Fury of the Gods, which was also directed by Sandberg. I did not know that. Did you guys see Annabelle in Aquaman 2018 and Shazam 2019? I did not, but now I'm going to watch and look again. She showed up in the DC universe? What? Okay, sorry. Wow, just my mind is blown. But anyway, that's Annabelle's story. But did you know that there's another purportedly, quote, most famous haunted doll out there? There is. And this one's a boy, and he resides in Florida. Eileen, does that... Eileen, you live in a state with a haunted doll. This haunted boy doll, his name is Robert. Robert the doll is an allegedly haunted doll exhibited in the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. Robert, once owned by painter, author, and Key West resident Robert Eugene Otto. The doll originally belonged to Robert Eugene Otto, an artist described as eccentric, who belonged to a prominent Key West family. The doll was reportedly manufactured by the Steiff Company of Germany, purchased by Otto's grandfather while on a trip to Germany in 1904, and given to young Otto as a birthday gift. The doll wears a sailor suit, and likely it's an outfit that Otto wore as a child as well. The doll remained stored in the Otto family home at 534 Eaton Street in Key West while Otto studied art in New York and Paris. Otto married Annette Parker in Paris in May of 1930, and the couple returned to the Otto family home in Key West to live there until Otto died in 1974. His wife died 2 years later. After their deaths, the Eaton Street home containing the doll was sold to Myrtle Reuter, who owned it for 20 years until the property was again sold to its current owners, who operate it as a guest house. In 1994, the doll was donated to the East Martello Museum in the Key West, Florida, where it became a popular tourist attraction. Let's dive into Robert's legend. Well, first, we know that science tells us dolls are inanimate objects, but those who care for Robert the doll and thousands who visit him each year know better. Lights flicker, cameras malfunction, letters of apology arrive on the daily basis. The bizarre circumstances surrounding Robert have earned him a reputation as the most haunted doll in the world. Robert is a one-of-a-kind handmade by the Steiff Company of Germany around the turn of the century. He stands about 40 inches tall and stuffed with wood and wool, known as excelsior. He is dressed in a sailor suit and once bore painted features not unlike those of a jester. A little boy in a sailor suit. His careworn face is only vaguely human. His nub of a nose looks like a pair of pinholes, and he is covered in brown nicks, like scars. His eyes are beady and black, and he wears a malevolent smirk. Clasped in his lap, he holds his own toy, a dog with a garish, popping eye and too big of a tongue lolling crazily out of its mouth. Here are some other things that people also agree is true about Robert. He's haunted and he has caused car accidents, broken bones, losses of jobs, divorces, and just a cornucopia of other misfortunes. His unusual size indicates that he may have been fashioned in the image of his constant companion, a boy named Robert Eugene Otto. The doll took Robert as his name, and the boy simply went by Gene. Together, they would go on to make history. The most widely accepted story is that Robert was the property of Robert Eugene Otto, an eccentric artist and member of a prominent Key West family. Yes, you guys, the doll and the owner had the same name, but the young boy answered to Gene, whereas they called the doll Robert. Robert was a childhood birthday gift from Otto's grandfather, who bought the doll during a trip to Germany. Otto's relationship with the doll continued well into adulthood. What people really remember is what they would probably term as an unhealthy relationship with the boy and the doll. He brought it everywhere. He talked about it in the first person as if he weren't a doll. He was Robert, and he was alive. He was an alive entity. According to legend, young Otto began to blame mishaps on the doll. While this could have been laughed off as childish storytelling, adults also started noticing odd occurrences, especially as Otto and Robert grew older. As an adult, Otto lived in a stately home that he called the Artist House, where Robert could be seen positioned in an upstairs window. School children swore that he would appear and disappear, only to reappear again in other windows as they passed by. So, most children avoided the house altogether. Myrtle Reuter purchased the Artist House after Otto's death in 1974 and became Robert's new caretaker. Visitors swore that they could hear footsteps in the attic and giggling, and some claimed that Robert's expressions changed when anyone badmouthed Otto in his presence. Reuter said that Robert would often move around the house on his own, and after 20 years of his antics, she donated him to the museum. Here are some alternative branches to the legend, or maybe some additions to the legend. According to other legends, the doll has supernatural abilities that allow it to move, change its facial expressions, and make giggling sounds. In some versions of the legend, it's claimed that a young girl of Bohemian descent gave Otto the doll as a gift or as a retaliation for wrongdoing. Other stories claim that the doll moved voodoo figurines around the room and was totally aware of what went on around him. And yet other legends claim that the doll, quote, vanished after Otto's house changed ownership a number of times after his death, or that young Otto triggered the doll's supernatural powers by blaming his childhood mishaps on that doll. According to local folklore, the doll has caused car accidents, broken bones, job loss, divorce, and many other misfortunes, and museum visitors supposedly experience post-visit misfortunes. The claim is that you will experience a post-visit misfortune if you fail to respect Robert on your visit. Robert is now 117 years old and lives at the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. And he has a new display case, which was recently donated by someone who was, quote, a fan of Robert's. But the comfortable new digs, complete with humidity control and UV filtering glass to preserve the artifact, do not seem to have reformed Robert's behavior. The museum still gets regular reports of evils attributed to the doll. But far from banishing Robert to obscurity, his arrival at the museum marked a turning point for the doll. Since Robert has arrived, visitors have flocked to the museum to get a look at the mischievous toy. He has appeared on TV shows and he has had his aura photographed. He's stopped on a ghost tour and he's inspired a horror movie. He even has his own Wikipedia entry and social media accounts. Fans can buy Robert replicas, books, coasters, t-shirts, and the most adventurous can even volunteer to be locked in with Robert after dark. And they can, and do, write to him. He gets probably 1 to 3 letters every day, according to the museum curators. But they aren't typical fan letters. They're often apologies. Many visitors attribute post-visit misfortunes to failing to respect Robert, or even openly disrespecting him, and they write in begging his forgiveness. Others ask him for advice, or some even ask him to hex those who have wronged them. Museum curators say that they have received more than 1,000 letters and they keep and catalog every single one. Robert also receives emails and homages. At some point, it became known that Robert had a sweet tooth, so people have been leaving him and sending him candy. Once he received a box containing 8 bags of peppermints, a card, and no return address. Exercising caution, the museum staff does not consume treats that are sent to Robert. Guests often leave him sweets, money, and occasionally even joints. Okay, I'm sorry. It's completely inappropriate, the museum says. We are still a museum, you know. All right. Well, occasionally the museum responds to correspondences on Robert's behalf. They try to send something to every child who writes to him. Gene always had that childlike temperament around him, and we feel like Robert would want him to be kind to children. And so they respond to the more poignant ones, such as an email from a girl who's being bullied at school. Hollywood side note. There is a horror film franchise loosely based on the legend that began with the film Robert, released in 2015. And to date, 4 sequels have followed. Then those are The Curse of Robert the Doll, 2016, The Toy Maker, 2017, The Revenge of Robert the Doll, 2018, and Robert Reborn, 2019. And some people even claim that he is the inspiration for the Chucky character in Child's Play movies. But the directors, writers, producers have all said, no, we didn't even know about Robert, nothing to do with Robert. But that theory still holds fast out there in the, theory community. But that, you guys, is Robert. So, my friends, do you believe in haunted dolls? Do you believe these dolls are or were haunted? Do you feel uneasy around dolls? Or is it just me? I mean, they say that every legend, haunting, folktale has or was started with a grain of truth. So did these dolls start with some grain of possession or haunting truth? Do you have a haunted doll or a haunted doll story to tell? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, stay safe, friends.